Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Babies in Common Show. I'm Jeanette.
And I'm Melissa. Welcome, listeners. Please note that any information shared during this show is not to be taken as medical advice. Please consult your own care providers for questions about you or your baby's health and visit babiesincommon.com/disclaimer to read more. And also, happy Pride Month, everybody. Woo! So June is Pride Month here in the United States and elsewhere, I believe. And Jeanette and I have our Pride apparel on today in celebration of all of our LGBTQIA listeners and babies in common families. And although today's topic is not only utilized by LGBTQIA families, they are certainly one of the biggest groups that do utilize this service. So today we are celebrating just one of the many different ways to make a family.
Yes, and so without further ado, today's show, we will be discussing alternative insemination with our special guest, Certified Nurse-Midwife, Marianne Pelletier. Marianne was inspired to enter birth work after the birth of her own children, and after becoming a nurse, she worked for 12 years in labor and delivery in both hospital and birth center. And in 1998, she completed her education as a Certified Nurse-Midwife, also known as CNM, at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. And since she has worked in a variety of settings, including a freestanding birth center, a small community hospital, and large teaching hospitals, providing holistic midwifery and gynecological care for people of all ages. I was just reflecting on the fact that I have younger family members who also see you. After more than 23 years of practice, she felt a call to return to a more personalized, intimate form of midwifery care and began attending home births at home. And I think you're one of 2 CNMs currently in the state that attend home birth. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. So in 2020, Marianne officially partnered with certified professional midwife Rachel Blessington to co-found Embrace Midwifery. Love that name. And they provide full spectrum midwifery care, planned home birth, and holistic gynecologic care throughout central Massachusetts with offices in Worcester, Fitchburg, and Dudley.
Yes, Marianne is indeed a very special guest today because not only was she my midwife for my home birth with my daughter Marceline in 2019, but she's also my boss as I work for Embrace Midwifery now. And she is our first return guest. That's right. Fans of the
Woohoo!
podcast might remember Marianne was a guest on our very first episode of the Babies in Common show back in April of 2020, where she discussed giving birth in a hospital during this brand new COVID-19 global pandemic.
Which was going to be over in a couple of weeks anyway, but
Yeah, right.
that didn't
Like
happen.
so long ago.
It does. It seems like so long ago, and yet only yesterday. It's weird time warp. So anyway, Marianne, we are so happy to have you back on the show. Thank you. And today we're actually going to be talking about the opposite of getting the baby out, which you talked about on your first show with us. We're going to be talking about one way to get the baby in. So welcome back, Marianne.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just a pleasure to be with you guys. Love your show. I listen to all your podcasts while I'm walking almost every day.
I love that. Thank you.
That's so good. All right, so getting down to business. So let's start with some basic definitions. So artificial insemination, also known as AI, which is different than artificial intelligence, is the deliberate introduction of sperm into someone's vagina or uterine cavity for the purpose of achieving a pregnancy by means other than sexual intercourse. Artificial insemination involves in vivo fertilization, which means conception, or when the sperm meets the egg, happens inside someone's body. And this is the opposite of in vitro fertilization, which is when the sperm meets the egg in a laboratory setting, and then the resulting embryo is implanted into the uterus by a fertility doctor. In vitro fertilization cannot be done in home or basic gynecology office like Marianne's.
Yes. And there are 2 types of artificial or alternative insemination, as it's sometimes called: intracervical insemination, or ICI, and intrauterine insemination, or IUI. Intracervical insemination, ICI, involves putting sperm into the vagina near the cervix, but not through the cervix, with a needleless syringe, as would happen with intercourse. Couples who choose ICI can use fresh or frozen donor sperm, and I will let your imagination inform you as to how couples obtain that fresh sperm. But intrauterine insemination is different than ICI. So IUI, intrauterine insemination, is different because it involves putting the sperm directly into the uterus using a tube that goes through the cervix. It's more involved than ICI, especially because the sperm has to be washed prior to the procedure, since you are inserting it directly into the uterus. And for that reason and others, like needing to use a speculum, et cetera, this is not usually something that people do at home, and instead opt to enlist the help of a doctor or a midwife, usually in a clinic setting. So today, specifically, we're going to be talking about IUI with Marianne, as she is this is a service that she provides in her beautiful home office in Fitchburg for Embrace Midwifery.
Yes. All right. So, Marianne, so we've established your background and you're not a reproductive endocrinologist and you don't work in a fertility clinic. So, why would somebody elect to come to you for an IUI instead of a fertility clinic, even knowing that your office is gorgeous and you're fantastic? So, who are the people you're seeing? Like, who's interested in this type of alternative insemination?
So the large majority of people that do come to see me for IUI are same-sex couples, lesbian couples, um, who are basically healthy, low-risk women who just don't have the male partner, and so maybe have tried ICI at home with some either you know, sperm bought through a sperm bank, or sperm from someone that they has agreed to that, and it wasn't working, and they're getting a little panicked and want to do that, or some just choose to come directly to IUI because it's, you know, they feel it's one step closer and easier to get pregnant. So probably the larger majority would be lesbian couples. I've had a couple of single women who've just chosen to
Hmm.
have a baby on their own and did not have a partner. But probably the large majority are the lesbian couples.
And who would you say is a good candidate for an IUI in a basic office setting? Like, why come to you instead of going to, one of the fertility clinics or reproductive clinics? What's the benefit?
So the infertility clinics are great. They're great for people who are having difficulty getting pregnant, but they all follow a protocol. They all have to follow specific protocols so that they can get all their statistics correct and accurate. And they're selling a service, so they want good statistics. So they make women go through all of their procedures and stuff. Some women, if you don't have insurance that covers that, it's extremely costly, very costly. And for women who, don't, a lesbian woman is healthy, doesn't think she has any problems getting pregnant, why would she want to go through all the testing, all the procedures that they have them go through it at an infertility clinic? So they have to go in for a hysteroscopy, they have to consent to all this blood work, they have to, go in and have a PEP, all this stuff that they have to do ahead of time. So I offer services that, again, I see them in the beginning, and as long as they're normal, healthy, having regular periods, and there's no reason to suspect that they have difficulty getting pregnant, those are the women that will come see me, rather than going to an infertility clinic. And a lot of them just don't like the whole process of going through that, the very medicalized, you know, procedure of doing that. Some want a more, less, what's the word I want?
More
Clinical.
holistic, less
Thank
clinical.
you.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
can speak personally to some of that. I know that I had 3 miscarriages and 3 years of trying before I got pregnant with Pierce, my first. So I did need to I had a male partner, so I didn't need IUI services at first. We tried for the 12 months without success and those issues. And I did enlist the help of a fertility doctor through a local fertility clinic, got the whole, $1 million workup, eventually got diagnosed with unexplained infertility, which anybody who has gotten that diagnosis, it is incredibly frustrating because, I'm like in my 20s and everybody around me is getting pregnant. Everybody in my family is getting pregnant and I am not. regardless, I did end up needing a medication called Clomid to help me ovulate mature eggs. And my husband got the workup as well. His sperm count was normal, fine. So it was definitely an issue with me. Once we got the right medication to ovulate appropriately, I got pregnant, had a very healthy pregnancy with a normal vaginal delivery. So because I didn't know about services at that time that Marianne provides, I wanted to get pregnant again. And so went back to the same fertility clinic, and they made me do all of that $1 million
Oh,
workup all
wow.
over again, like proving that my tubes were patent and proving that Paul's sperm was fine. I'm like, it's not his problem. Like, and luckily my
Wow.
insurance did cover all of that. But the thyroid testing, the anemia testing, all of this stuff that I had already gone through. And so while, for me, I kind of felt like I already knew that system. I already knew those doctors, and it was an inconvenience, but it wasn't a huge inconvenience. So since it was covered, by my insurance, I just said, all right, we'll just do it. But in hindsight, knowing what I know now, it would have been really nice to not have to go through all of that
Yeah.
and, prove that my husband was fertile, because it wasn't his issue. And again, same thing with number 3, I had to do it all over again.
Oh
My
my
husband was like, I
gosh.
really need to give another semen sample.
Jeez.
And I was like, yes, you do.
Oh.
Because otherwise my insurance wouldn't cover. That was the other thing too. They wouldn't cover any of the treatments if I didn't go through the workup. So that, that's one thing. And then another thing I'd like to mention is that some couples that I've taken care of in my career, or friends that I've had, especially if they're lesbian couples or maybe trans, that donor sperm is expensive. And so while there's some debate as to whether IUI is more effective than, just doing ICI, like putting the sperm into the vagina, there's some debate about that. There is some studies that show that it's slightly higher success rate. And when you're spending a lot of money on frozen donor sperm, sometimes couples feel like, well, I want to give it the 3 best shots. Is that something that you find, Marianne?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
It is extremely expensive. I want to say, depending on which sperm bank you go to, it's hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
And people usually will go through, the rolls and of all these different sperm donors they have. They want a specific donor with specific traits and this and that. And then they have to purchase, if they decide that this is the person they want, they have to know how many, samples or things are available. They purchase them and put them aside. So it can be extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Hundreds of dollars. I want to say like $600, and then it's a huge fee to have it transported.
Sure.
Because they transport it and it's frozen in this big tank, and it's crazy expensive. So I mean, yeah, so they want to increase it by that 2 to 3 to 4 or 5%, and put it as closely as they can. So yeah.
I have a question about single people and same-sex people who are wanting to do this. Is it that insurance just won't pay for them because they don't have a male partner? Is that right? Or would they just have to go through that whole process of the same thing you had to go through, Melissa, even though they don't have a male partner?
Well, I was going to say, in my experience, sometimes the insurance does not pay for any type
Right.
of
That's what I was
treatments
thinking.
unless you have a diagnosis of infertility.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have to have that diagnosis of infertility. So you
Yep.
have to be, under the age of 30 and have tried for 12 months, or over the age of 30 and tried for 6 months.
Right.
So, or even
So
lesbian couples, sometimes they're starting to cover it now, but they have to have, 6 documented IUIs
oh,
before that will kick in.
okay.
And then they can
Right.
move on to the, $1 million workup and all that. So it's still, insurance to insurance is very different, but infertility is, again, defined very differently by insurance companies and doctors.
And otherwise, IUIs are done like in a typical OB's office or no?
I don't, a lot of people did not, or stopped at least doing it with live donors because it's time intensive. And you know, you have to be available. The problem is it's around a cycle. So a lot of offices don't provide that service because what if she's ovulating on Saturday or Sunday?
Okay.
So it doesn't benefit, you know, and the reimbursement, if it does get reimbursed, is not a lot of money. So
Mm.
it's kind of an inconvenience for a lot of places. So I don't know of too many like private offices that provide that service that I know of, although I
Right.
really haven't gone
So
look.
all the more reason why it's fantastic that you do what you do because it's not that common.
Exactly.
It's
Nice.
really, it really is more of a service, meaning I know of a midwife office that does it. And for all the reasons that Marianne said, it's not like this is something that's generating a lot of money for them. The
Mm-hmm.
reason why this particular midwife office does it is because one of the midwives in in the practice is a lesbian herself and wanted something like this to provide to her community. But it took a whole lot of arranging for, again, like Marianne said, the call schedule of if it's a Saturday, if it's Christmas Day, and this particular midwife or this team of midwives that have been trained in this, right? Because not all the midwives in the practice are trained in it, not all the nurse practitioners are trained in it. If they are, what kind of relationships can they make with different fertility clinics in the area to kind of cover these off shifts? And so,
Mm.
not to brag on you, Marianne, but it's kind of like, a hidden gem to find someone like Marianne or someone like this midwife office, which happens to be in the Cambridge area, that will provide this type of service because it can be much more affordable and less clinical for those types of couples that, otherwise don't need the infertility workup.
So how do people determine whether they should even call you? Like who's a good candidate? What are the
Besides being
parameters?
besides being, not having a known infertility and just starting to try out, is there
Yep.
anybody that like, other than that wouldn't be a good candidate or would be?
No, so, you know, healthy women of the reproductive age that are having, you know, normal regular cycles. If you're having a normal regular cycle, the odds are very high that you are ovulating. So it's just a matter of, you know, lining all those things up, figuring out, you know, when you're ovulating, tracking your cycles, doing all that. So, you know, really.
When you say healthy, is it like certain age parameters, weight parameters, medical history, like if they're high risk with X, Y, or Z
Yeah.
condition, do you
So
tend to say no? Like what about those things?
yeah, so there are certain things that can impede your fertility. So, um, you know, some of those things may come into that. So a lot of the times when I'm taking calls or you know, getting referrals for that, I'll ask them a brief medical history of stuff going on. So people with diabetes, people, you know, or borderline diabetes, or you know, people that are you know, obese. Sometimes those have impact on fertility or have impact on higher miscarriage rates and stuff like that. So those are some of the things that, you know, especially during the first visit and stuff, that we kind of go over all those things. So people with an underlying health history sometimes, um, you know, depending on what that is, they may not be a good candidate.
Mm.
So.
So if someone is interested in alternative insemination with you or a clinic like yours, the first step is generally to have a consultation.
Mhm.
And so, like you said, you would review their medical history and talk about preconception care.
Mhm.
You would discuss how to, monitor your menstrual cycle and predict ovulation. Um, excuse me. And then anything else that happens in an appointment like that?
So usually an appointment like that, again, you know, I'm going over their, you know, their medical history. I'm going over their cycle history. I'm talking with them about, you know, fertility and fertility awareness. I usually ask that they be monitoring their cycles for a good 3 months in advance, if they can, just to kind of so that they can get to know their cycles. And when they are ovulating, most of them, I mean, I don't know what we did before the advent. Well, I do know what we did before the advent of all those ovulation predictor kits. You know, you took your temperature every single morning, and you waited for the temperature dip to go down. But now we have the ovulation predictor kits that are amazing. So going over all that, I always give them a list of the supplements that I suggest during pregnancy to start on before they get pregnant. We talk about nutrition, we talk about lifestyle, all those preconception type things, that I talk with other women who are trying to conceive. So, so yeah, and then we talk about the procedure itself, how they access, sperm, if they're doing a live or a known donor. We talk about, so usually that's a whole separate thing that I make sure that they're aware of, that there are some legal terms that sometimes are necessary if you have a known donor. Depending on how they feel in that relationship, it's always best to look at the legalities of conception with a known donor. And also they're responsible for, making sure, have they been tested for STDs? Do they have a good genetic background? All those types of things. It's in my consent form that they are responsible for, obtaining all that information with them.
And insurance is often covering it, but not always. So is there a private pay fee associated with that? What if it's not covered by insurance? Like, how is that working?
So some insurance will cover it. I've had most of the insurance are not covering it. So they do not cover sperm. No insurance covers the sperm.
Oh,
Is the most expensive part of it.
oh.
So
Is that true even if you're going through IVF? Same thing, right?
Yep.
Because yeah.
Yep, they
Right.
do not cover the sperm. So they don't cover for that. So some of them will cover for the quote unquote procedure itself. And they cover anywhere from, it's usually around $100, maybe up to $150 or so. And then they usually pay the higher copay for that. So, but I found that most of the insurances that I've had, my clients have had, are not covering it. So.
Wow.
And, that might seem a little daunting because these things are expensive, but to say the flip side of it is if you were otherwise healthy, for example, same sex or, trans couple that just needed this service to physically get pregnant as opposed to infertility, going through an infertility clinic, if things are not covered by your insurance, they're going to require things like ultrasounds to measure your lining. And instead of doing the ovulation predictor kit at home, you're going to be getting LH surge blood draws, 3-4 times a cycle. And so all of those things are going to be even more expensive than doing it through somebody like Marianne. So those costs definitely add up.
Yeah, those costs are definitely add up. And again, people who are having problems conceiving, that's a reason why they want that more in-depth
Correct. Yeah.
look at stuff. Where the women that I'm seeing usually are pretty, they're pretty healthy. There's no reason to think ahead of time that they might be having a problem conceiving.
Yeah. So what is the procedure like? What happens? They come in and you're talking about like washing sperm and getting a live sample, and how are you inserting it? And can you give us a description of that?
Sure. So most of the people that I deal with are buying their sperm through a sperm bank. And again, we go through the whole process of monitoring their cycles and stuff so that they know they're on day 10 or 11, they're going to call ahead, order the sperm because they know they're going to be ovulating between day 12 and 14. So that gets delivered, and it gets delivered in this big, huge canister with dry ice and all that stuff to keep it frozen. And then we, once they ovulate, they call me, bring their whole little, I don't require they bring the whole big tank, but they take that out of the tank, put it in a little, like an insulated coffee cup. It's a tiny little, vial that has like 1 cc or 3/4 of a
Oh,
cc.
wow.
It's a tiny little thing. So they bring it to the office so that it's kind of thawing out as they get here. And then I have her hold it in her hand to kind of warm it up and thaw it out completely. And then the procedure is basically pretty simple.
But then you have to like talk to it and be like, come on, make a baby.
And we do that after we put it in.
Oh.
Swim, baby, swim. So it's very similar to a pap smear. I place the speculum after gaining their consent. I put the speculum in. I'll draw up the sample in a small syringe with a tube that's about this long,
like 6 inches long, maybe.
Yeah, an intrauterine catheter. So once that's drawn up into that syringe, I then place it, I find the cervix and with the speculum, and then I thread that through the cervix up into the uterus. So most often it's not that uncomfortable, but sometimes getting through that cervix, especially on someone who's never had a baby, even though it's quite thin, that cervix has a lot of little dimples and pockets that, threading it through there sometimes can be a little uncomfortable.
So you say a little uncomfortable. So I have had a colposcopy and I needed to have the laminaria and it hurt like hell eventually.
Yes.
Is that, I mean, I don't remember if it hurt in that moment or it just started to hurt over time. So refresh for anybody who's also thinking that question. If they've had that
It
experience.
would not be the same experience.
Not the same.
Laminaria is
Okay.
Laminaria swells.
Yeah,
And that was the
laminaria is like
swelling
the
that-
size
right.
of a pencil
right,
that they're
right.
sticking in there. Yeah, this is
Oh,
a
is it
very
that big? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and they
Okay.
put more than one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. See, I'm glad to know. All right, because I would have been like, oh, that's gonna scare me.
Yeah.
So it's crampy. It feels
It's
really
crampy.
crampy.
That's what I tell people. You're going to feel crampy, and at any point we need to stop. So, and once I get it in through that cervix, just slowly injecting it. So what it does is it places all those little sperm way up at the top of the uterus, as close to the fallopian tubes as possible. So what a lot of people don't realize is that the egg actually gets fertilized in the fallopian tubes. So that's why you want to get it in the uterus, up on top of the uterus, where those fallopian tubes are. And then I'll usually just have them lie down there for a good 10 to 15 minutes.
With their legs up on the wall behind your exam table.
Yeah, and sometimes, it's, I don't know if there's any data behind that, but it's usually, people think it's just going to fall out. I want to keep it up there. So I let, laying down there for 15 minutes or so gives those little guys a chance to kind of swim around and find the place where they need to go. Sometimes you can have a little bit of spotting or bleeding, just getting through that very friable, cervix. It's, the cervix is like the inside of your mouth. It's a mucous membrane. It can be tender. So sometimes you'll have a little bit of spotting and bleeding.
Yes, our friend Alexis Topham, midwife, also former midwife. I don't know. I guess she still is a midwife still, a little bit. But she used to say your nose and your mouth are cousins of your vagina.
I like that.
I still have a question though. So washing the sperm, can you tell like what you do, why you do it? Why does that have to happen?
Sure.
And so you've got the frozen, which has already been taken care of, right?
The frozen has already been taken care of. And I'm sure that women who are going to be doing the IUI make sure that they do get and it's a little bit more expensive because it's been washed. So, but that you cannot place an unwashed specimen in the uterus. So somebody who has a known donor, you get the sperm sample, and then usually people, we go through the whole process of tell them not to, have any ejaculation for 2 days before so that we have a good volume of sperm, So they'll bring the sample. It has to be a fresh sample within a half an hour. So it needs to be started to process within a half an hour of obtaining that sample. The sample should be kept warm. It should be in I'll give them a little cup, like a urine specimen cup. Or they can just do a clean jar at home, that I have them just like dip in boiling water. And then the washing process, there's actually washing kits that you can buy that have 2 different mediums. So what you do is get a portion of the sample, you put it in a test tube, and then you spin it like crazy with a centrifuge.
Mm.
So the first spin is with the wash, takes about a half an hour. And what it does is it spins down all that through the medium, and it forms a tiny little pellet at the bottom of this, like a pointed test tube almost. And then you pour off that medium, and then you add to it the second medium, and you agitate it a little bit. So that's the second wash. And that one takes about 15 to 20 minutes. And you spin that down again. And then you pour off that, and then you're left with that small little pellet of sperm and a small amount of medium that you can draw up. So it's basically similar. It's a very small amount, like a milliliter, same as the frozen one that comes from the sperm bank. So you draw that up, and the procedure is the same. It's just more time intensive because of all the washing and the spinning and
Yeah.
all
So
that.
basically, if someone were having that situation and you were helping them with the washing, they would basically go off and have a nice long lunch and then come back when it's
No, that would be an option. But no, people usually kind of hang out. Yeah, the first
while you're helping make their baby. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And for people that might be thinking, well, I got pregnant and my husband didn't wash his sperm. So why does sperm have to be
Right.
washed? A lot of people don't
Yeah.
realize that
Yeah.
sperm is in seminal fluid, the semen, right? The sticky white stuff. And only the sperm go into the uterus through the cervix. Actually, the semen stays in the vagina. So that's what the washing procedure is. It's removing the semen and seminal fluid and all of that, and just getting the little swimmers to inject into the uterus.
There's a bunch of other junk in that seminal fluid. You don't want that in your uterus.
So I have a question. Have you ever been able to catch a baby
I totally
that
want
you
to know that
helped
too.
that you helped them
Yes.
get pregnant with?
I did.
Woo!
Oh, that must
That's
be so
so cool.
special.
Exciting. Yeah.
Did they go so far as to post that on social media that my midwife got me pregnant and she caught the baby?
No, not that I know of.
Yeah, I know.
But that's so special.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me to our next question is, why do you personally provide this service? Because it's time intensive, and you have to kind of be on call 24/7, and you're in kind of a private practice. So what made you get into doing something like this?
I just think it's a good thing to do. There are, I have a daughter who's in a same-sex marriage, and they had to do the same thing, and it's hard to find. I mean, she lived out in the Boston area, and they had the Fenway, which the Fenway is a great group out in the Boston area. That's a whole center that's set up for the LGBTQ community that I get a lot of my information from for starting to do that. And I just, really realized it's a need, having a daughter who's a lesbian. And a lot of people have a hard time finding somebody, or a lot of people, there's so many assumptions that are made when people go into infertility clinics or try to find services like that. And it's, it can be dehumanizing for them or insulting that, there are certain questions and assumptions that are made. So I think it's just, for me, it was just a part of a service that I wanted to offer, just because I believe all women should have access to that, and all women should have access to kind and compassionate providers. And it should be cost effective,
Right.
I think privacy wise too, like, whether it's a single person or lesbian couple or trans person who wants to get pregnant, being able to come to your home where you have that beautiful office, or one of your other offices if you start doing it in one of those, they're cozy and beautiful, and it's more private, and you don't have this like big waiting room where there's lots of people waiting around. It's just a very different experience. And on the other hand, separate from that but similar in a way, like, it also exposes them to the fact that home birth is an option.
Mhm.
which is really a neat continuation of that for some people, if appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know that not only does Marianne provide the service, but I know that there's the Fenway in Boston, as Marianne said, also the midwives at Mount Auburn and Cambridge.
Mhm.
Do you guys know of any other Massachusetts-based providers that are doing it?
Yep. So the midwives out at Seven Sisters
Oh, good. Right.
Center, Ginny out there also provides those services and has been for a while.
That's in the Northampton area.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, out in Florence. I don't know of any.
And you had mentioned before we got on the recording that you also have people who come from other states because these services are not available in those states, or they just choose
Well,
to come down towards you.
a lot of people advertise. So we were recently talking about it, and there were a couple of the CNMs. CPMs who provide the service. I don't know if they do the whole wash thing, but a couple of the CPMs. But again, I was like, I didn't know you did that. Why didn't you advertise that? Or
Sure.
so I think it's just finding, being able to find somebody that provides those services. And again, just making sure that they, if they are doing the wash and stuff, that they have all that training and stuff behind that.
Mhm.
Sure. If there's any listeners that know of any other clinics in Massachusetts or providers in Massachusetts or even the New England area, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, email us at info@babiesincommon.com because we would love to, put on the show notes that other clinics that are providing the service.
I know my daughter's, she's on maternity leave now, but she was
Oh,
in New Hampshire. And I know she's starting up a whole separate, they are very welcoming to the gay and lesbian community, the LGBTQ community up there. And she is, I think, getting up started all new services up there, not only for that, but for trans folks, for hormonal stuff. And they probably will be starting that up and doing, and they may already do the IUI. I'm not sure I should.
And where is your daughter practicing out of?
She practices up in Keene at the Cheshire Medical Center.
wait, is she a midwife too?
She is a midwife.
Oh, what did I know that? Oh my gosh.
Tried to talk her out of it.
That's so cool. Yeah. Oh,
Are there
wow.
any other questions you have, Jeanette?
No, I mean, I'm just fascinated. I've learned so much. I get questions sometimes. I got one last week from somebody about related to miscarriage actually. And I was like, I really focus on the baby coming out portion. Like, and a little bit before that, I know some stuff, but like the stuff that happens like pre 34 weeks, I'm kind of like, I don't really know.
Yeah.
So this is great to find out about for sure. And I will definitely mention it to people, even if they're heterosexual, because I think there's people who this would be another alternative for them that they would find more appealing in some
Yeah.
cases,
Yeah, I've seen, heterosexual couples that come that, having trying to get pregnant and haven't been able to. We talk about that. We talk about the different male factors and stuff. Marijuana, believe it or not, has been, I think 3 of my couples finally got pregnant because their partner, male factor, are heavy smokers of marijuana. And it can cause less mobile sperm. So, yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff that you just don't know. So,
yeah, it reminds me, Melissa, of that parody. I think it's Italian with that couple in a hospital that are trying to make a baby, and the doctors and the nurses keep coming in and giving them suggestions about positions. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
like they're like trying to have some privacy in the bathroom, and they come in with the clipboard and be like, "Did you try this? Like, did you try that?"
Exactly.
It's totally not that.
yeah.
Right. Well, I hope that anybody who's looking to get pregnant, whether they're heterosexual or LGBTQIA, or whether they have been trying not at all or trying for a while, that they consider having a preconception consultation with a holistic provider like yourself, because I think that, having a preconception consultation, whether or not you're thinking that you're at risk for infertility is important, because the healthier you are before you get pregnant, the healthier pregnancy that you can have. And things like not knowing that, marijuana can decrease sperm motility could be something that causes you a lot of headaches and heartaches
Yeah.
until you find out, we could have quit that, 6 months ago. So especially since it's now legal here in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Especially now that it's legal, I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, even a preconception consult for breastfeeding, I think,
Yeah.
is a good idea for like functional medicine and nutrition, and trying to get some of the other factors that you have going in your body balanced by, like, we had a whole episode with Julia Resnick, who's a functional medicine doctor, talking about preconception consults that she can do to get everything. There's a lot of things people can do besides just talking to your general provider of obstetrical care for getting ready to have a baby and optimizing that experience.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Marianne, thank you so much for coming on our show again.
Thank you so much for
And
having me.
so if anybody's located in central Massachusetts or is willing to drive here and wants to learn more about intrauterine insemination with Marianne, visit embracemidwifery.care/services. And if you're not in central Massachusetts, try alternative insemination programs near me in whatever browser search bar you're using to see if there's any holistic, family-centered artificial insemination providers near you.
Yes, we hope you all enjoyed today's show, and we hope you will tune in again. We also hope you will visit babiesincommon.com to learn more about our classes, groups, and services that can help you rock your birth and thrive as a new parent. Remember, Babies in Common is a community for you. After all, we all have
Babies in common.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thanks.
Thank you.